15, so let's get started. And Sam Watson is not here, but he was at the ag meeting before, and he had another meeting, but he wants to be here later on, so he will definitely be here. Okay. I just want to welcome everybody and thank y'all so much for coming. And y'all will find, we're going to give out these blue packets to everybody on the, if you'll give them out to the board members, okay? Oh, they have them? You have a blue packet. All right, in your blue packet, first of all, you will find a, and we'll talk about subcommittees. I'm real anxious to get some things done. And in this package, you will find a study committee report we had. And we made recommendations in the study committee. And you will see when you read the study committee that none of the things were done. And I just don't want this committee to be something and nothing get done. So I have decided, since y'all were so nice to welcome his chairman, to make some subcommittees. And you'll find in your packet who's on the subcommittee. And Operations and Food Security, Dr. Hatchett, I'm not Dr. Hatchett, Senator Hatchett, Senator Hatchett, I used to go to somebody named Dr. Hatcher. Senator Hatchett, Russ Goodman, and Representative Watson. And Oversight on Transportation. And to touch it a little bit on the transportation, I did go out to the farmer's market when we met on a Thursday, and when I went home on Friday, I did go out to the farmer's market in Atlanta. And I went on the side over where they have the public access to things. And there's absolutely no signage and no traffic patterns. And you'll see in the study committee, we recommended they do some signage. And so this is some oversight to transportation logistics, Senator Say and Representative Carpenter. On the audit oversight, there's an audit report in here, and on the audit oversight is Representative Gilliard and Senator Anderson, and y'all will see that by reading the audit report what needs to be done and talking to them about why things were not done in the audit report. And if y'all will review the audit report and see about that. The economic impact and improvement study, there was something that was recommended that we might get a third party to look into economic impact study and improvements. And so on that committee, we did Representative Dickey and Senator Walker. Is everybody okay with their committee, or would you like to be on? Is everybody fine with it? Because I really want to see something get. If we're going to do this and come to meetings and spend our time, I want something done. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, first of all, the first thing on the agenda was the study of the Macon, a report on the Macon market. And you will find Paul Thompson, you want to give us a report on the Macon market?
So Matt's going to walk.
Oh, okay, excuse me.
I can hardly talk, guys.
Oh, well, that's fine. Y'all work together, and I'm sorry.
I'm going to try to answer any
Matthew, go ahead.
I'm just going to leave that out.
You got it. Now, just to get us started, I know that there has been some issues currently and in the past with the, and if everybody has, you should have a printout with you, but it's on the presentation as well. With the losses at the Macon market, why does it run in a deficit? So that's really kind of the main topic that I was going to discuss in this. We'll talk a little bit an overview of what the Macon market does and how it operates, but we'll really get into why there are losses at the Macon market, what could potentially be done in order to fix those, but some of the main issues that exist. When we talk about the Macon market, we're talking about this property. If everyone's on the second page, what you'll see is it's kind of odd in that there's that building, the shed building, that's kind of drawn out of it. But everything within that red highlighted area is part of the Macon market. That includes that wooded area in the north part of the market. So that is part of the state property.
Yep, you got it. Okay. So everything inside the red lined area is part of the state farmers market. The highlighted buildings that you see on that are the buildings that have been transferred over for GMA's use recently. So that was a straight property transfer. They do not pay us a lease rate, but they do cover the utilities of those facilities, which has been a significant cost savings for us. The only other building I do want to highlight, because we talk about the office training center quite a bit in this presentation, but it's the building kind of in the middle there with the big parking lot attached to it. That smaller building, that's the office building. Hopefully y'all can see that. Does that make sense?
You mean the smaller building?
Yeah, the smaller building kind of in the north middle part of the property with the large parking lot to its west.
Okay.
So that kind of gives you an overview of the landscape of it. So the overall considerations in fiscal year 2022, which is the one we're in, I would expect the market to operate at a deficit between $25,000 and $75,000. I do know that there's been some projections that our finance division's done that are higher than that, but I think these are going to be the more accurate numbers in terms of that forecast.
Well, so you think, who did the 105,000?
That was our finance division, and there's several issues that I would have in their projections of that. And we voiced those with them. I think that what they're doing is simply taking expenses from last year and copying them over to this year, but the expenses are not linear, or they're not going to be the same every month. So there were spikes in some of those expenses from last year that they're adding into the expectation for this year, which we wouldn't expect.
So you expect the expenses to be at what kind of loss?
25,000 to 75,000 operating loss. Yep.
Okay.
And those losses are due to some structural programmatic issues to the Macon market that are not easily fixed. But I do believe that the Macon market is a valuable public good property to the state of Georgia, and one that does serve a purpose and has a value for still being part of the farmers market systems. And evaluating it simply on whether it's running in a deficit or positive or it's making money is not a fair way to evaluate that market. If we look simply on those expenditures, so the Macon market typically costs $230,000 to operate. $120,000 of that's going to be personnel services for a part-time manager and 2 full-time staff. $65,000 is for utilities, which is significant for our markets. $23,000 is for telecom and IT expenses, which is even more significant, which is a considerable amount compared to what we pay at other markets. $40,000 in supplies and repairs and maintenance is also higher than what we would pay at other markets. The overhead costs, the reason why these are more than what we have at other markets is because of that office training center that's at the State Farmers Market. This is a facility that the department uses for a couple different agency functions. There's a copying machine there, and there's extensive telecom systems so that they can do virtual meetings. There's cameras and computer setups, so it's got much better internet access.
Well, do
than
y'all
some
have
of our
to
other
provide that for them?
Well, the costs for that fall under the market, not on other parts of the
Do
department.
you charge rent to the departments?
We do not.
Do you charge a estimate every time they use it that you can deduct it and have transfers over to y'all?
Now, I know Paul would love to put a coin slot in by the toilets, so whenever they go in and use it, they would, but, I mean, we haven't done that yet. I think it's a very fair.
Well, until we find out how much somebody's using it, we won't really know how much it's really costing the market.
That's correct. And it's used
Can you
heavily.
get us the days that they use it? How many days a year they use it?
I would say almost, yeah, every day.
Any other questions regarding that? Representative Dickey.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like for the committee, these points, overall conditions. I'm at the Macon Market a lot, go by there a lot. I'm actually go in to do business, not with my crops, but just, it does serve a very valuable, in my opinion, public good, as he said here. It's not operated very much as a farmer's market, but with all these other ancillary people using the property, it really does serve a pretty big need. I mean, you wouldn't replicate it in this day and time at all, but since it's owned by the state, it's used, and a couple of years ago, we even pitched to the local industrial authority and the city government of Macon if they had any use for this facility, and they had none. So that's kind of what you're into. You got a big asset of land and buildings and somewhat underutilized, but the utilization is valuable. So I think you've got a very accurate description and summary of what's really going on at Macon. And I suspect it's similar to some other farmers markets in some form or fashion is what you see here in Macon.
Yeah.
Those small businesses out there do value being able to be there, and some other seasonal business find it very valuable to be at their place. So anyway, just my thoughts on it as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Anderson. Senator, he used to be a representative.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Now, explain to me who comes in and uses this facility every day you talking about? that
Sure.
use it?
So, the large percentage of department employees are inspectors that are all over the state. Macon being a centralized location in the state, many inspectors come in to use the Wi-Fi there, to use the printing capabilities, the copier that's there, and then there's a large training facility. So whenever we need to have large meetings of people together, we typically use that facility for it in the central Georgia area. In addition to that, fuel and measures, go ahead, Paul.
I'm going to add to your point, Madam Chair. There's actually an office. I guess it's 3 suites that Fuel and Measures uses for bonding and warehousing. That's in that. And to the point of how often is it used, that's daily, ma'am. So they're there every day. Now, you could certainly argue that during COVID, during the pandemic, there's been less group meetings, less trainings, and there's no denial of that. But those offices operate daily for Fuel and Measures, and the marketing division does not charge the Fuel and Measures division rent for that office space or the utilization of it.
Well, should it be under farmers markets when it's really not for farmers markets?
Should the space be?
No, should it be put to their account when it's really not a farmer's
I
market?
understand.
Because it makes us look like
It
we're
does-
losing that
it does
much
indeed.
money.
Yes,
And it's
agreed.
hard for us to justify a farmer's market losing that much money. And maybe the accounting might be, I'm not an accountant. Maybe you need to change the way you're putting it on your books.
That's right.
Was
One
Representative
follow-up-
Anderson.
One follow-up question. Is this outside the property line? Is that a large building, or is that a parking lot, or what is that?
It's a large warehouse.
Warehouse, okay.
And you're speaking to the
On the-
left side?
On the left
Yes,
side,
sir.
yeah, okay.
It's a large
all right,
warehouse.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to ask you about you have 2 full-time staffers. You have a part-time manager and two full-time staffers.
That's correct.
How many people do you have coming to the market daily? To the real market, not to your training center?
We haven't done a recent study, but and it's seasonal,
Yeah,
so it's,
yeah,
go ahead, Paul.
in tree season, which started, I guess, yesterday, or seasonal, whether that's pumpkins or whether that's Christmas trees, that number is going to be greatly increased. But I don't know an exact number, but I would think it would be several hundred to up to 1,000 that are coming daily. As far as those 3 folks, we use them to keep the office open and the market open. So whether it's the 2 full-times, one of those folks is, his schedule has him outside on the sheds, working with vendors, whatever that may, cleaning up, cutting grass. One is an office person, and then our manager is actually the part-time person.
How many vendors do you have there? I don't see
I
that.
think we've got that here.
At least, there's leased tenants So there's probably about 6 to 7 leased tenants, and we've got monthly revenue reports that I can share with you on that one. And then there's going to be your vendors on the stalls selling fresh produce.
And how many of those?
It's, again, seasonal. I can think of 3 that are there almost the full year round.
And then that increases,
Yeah.
6 to 8. But that's, if we go back to what we transferred to GEMA, we've been able to have the 2 on the far right are 2 open sheds. And those were sheds that weren't being filled. So we've been able to take the folks that were there and put them into the next shed to the west to have that for where our farmers go. And I haven't been down there in a month or so, but I want to say there were 7 or 8 vendors last time I was there that rented the shed.
Now, where are the vendors right here?
That's correct. So the one just to the left of the 2 yellow buildings. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
those
so
2
you
are
don't have
ours.
any air in that building?
It's an open shed.
Open shed?
Yes, ma'am.
But I was looking at your electricity bill.
That's correct. So the air conditioning is going to be in that center building. There's some vendors there, and in the office space that's there. In addition to that, the security lighting is typically an expensive expense for the entire market and all of our markets.
Representative Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You said it was 6 or 7 that does leases?
I would think so. So there's 2 major leased areas. One is the mall area, which is the one that the little map pin is in.
The one that what's in it?
The little map pin, where the little red dot
okay.
is.
Right.
That's the C building or the mall. It's got an open middle, and then there's enclosed spaces to the sides. It probably has about 6 leased tenants. They're a mixture of restaurants and artisanal. There's a baker there. There's a tea company that makes loose leaf teas there that operate in that space. And then you have several other leased areas where we're leasing space for parking, specifically in this large parking area at the top here. There's companies that use the market space for cross-docking, plugging in their refrigerated vehicles, that sort of thing.
How long is the lease for?
1 year?
Leases are typically for a year. The leases are for a year, and then they have a renewal note clause. Yes, sir.
Are they up to the going rate of what the market is in Macon?
We believe so. And we've got some more information on that later in the presentation, but the difficulty is that area of Eisenhower Parkway is, on some hard times, and it's tough to even get tenants in some of those facilities.
Representative Gilligan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I saw your expenses. I saw everything. I don't see anything dealing with marketing. And so the survival of that market, how is it going to survive when it has no marketing dollars?
That's correct. We haven't spent any money on promoting that market. We've done some public relations type promotions. We've done some Facebook promotions. We used to have events there in the past to try to get people there, but I agree, we are severely limited in our marketing budget for all of the markets.
So when you say we, are you saying the Department of Ag or those employees that work for the Macon Farmers Market?
I would say that as a marketing budget, we don't have, for the Department of Agriculture, the marketing budget that we'd set aside for all of our farmers markets is limited or very, very small.
So in Savannah, sometimes when we do have a parable of success, and you all have attributed to that with the festivals that we have, we partner with the radio stations. We partner, no expense at all.
Right.
Part of that could be training for those employees to reach out to the community and partner with those radio and those print ads. You'd be amazed, in Savannah, we have Cumulus Broadcasting, and they bring all their stations, all the vendors, et cetera, at no expense.
Yeah.
So, just a recommendation.
Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
suggestion. And you know, I look at these expenses, your telephone and IT expense, and you've got one space is open, and you rent out the others, so all these IT expenses are really over on your office.
That's correct.
So you really can't say that that's an expense of the farmer's market.
Agreed, it's just.
But it just makes it, when it looks like we want to keep the farmer's market open, it makes it look bad that we're throwing it in with the farmer's market. To
That-
me, it does. Am I off base about this?
I would agree.
It looks like it's a bookkeeping thing they need to get straightened out about the way they're spending the money. And not wanting us to put money in a farmer's market when we're really putting it in a training center.
That's correct.
And maybe that's something appropriations needs to work out in the budget. Are we all in agreement? Okay. All right, we got that settled. Okay. All right, go ahead now. If that's okay with y'all, we'll try to work it out in appropriations. Is that okay with you? Okay. Because it's something we need to get straight.
Yeah.
Okay. Then, would you get Morgan to work on how much is really going to this training center and how much is going to the true farmers markets? Because we want to take out anything that's not going to the farmers market and put it in a training center. Is that fine with y'all?
That'd be great. You know, another way some of these expenses could be better aligned is, I know there's been discussions of an authority, and that would be a way to separate these uses a little better than it all being put together under the Department of
Yeah.
Agriculture.
But if we had an authority, we're talking about a farmer's market authority, and that would pull it out.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. But I think we could really see how much it was costing us to keep the building open if we had that. Go ahead now, we've got that straight.
Yeah, and we have some information that may be helpful with that. On the revenue side, so the annual average revenues for the Macon market are $180,000. This is limited because we do not have any cooler space at the Macon market. Most of our major revenues that come from the other markets comes from cooler space. The property surrounding the Macon market is, is an issue with the market. It's neighbored by a public housing project, and the Eisenhower corridor there has had difficulty retaining tenants all along it. So it's not just an issue with the estate farmers market that's there. We recently did appraisals of all of our state farmers markets, which I believe was on the thumb drive last time, but I'd be happy to give you a copy. You can see the quote that Valbridge did there that says that the market for retail use and small commercial in that area has been slow and almost negative. In addition to that, they didn't recommend another better use for that facility. They still say that the best use for it would be retail commercial development. And then I mentioned again that the market receives no revenue from the office training facility. The Valbridge appraisal, and I just pulled one section out of it, showed what market rent estimates would be for those facilities. And the blue line there, you see there's retail commercial, that's the commercial mall that's currently there, that's $150,000. That's the only one we receive a rent income from. The kind of teal green line beneath it is that market office, and it estimates that we could receive a revenue of $112,000 on that. However, they also said that we should be able to receive a revenue of $101,000 off of Building B. This is the building that was transferred over to GEMA. However, we always had a lot of difficulty leasing that facility. And one of the biggest issues we'd run into is, and this could be something that could be studied, we were told we would never be able to hire a realtor or a broker to help us broker and advertise some of these facilities, because typically in those agreements, they would require a percentage of the lease that they were able to secure. And because of the way the department's set up with all the revenues going back to the general fund, we wouldn't be able to set up contracts like that with realtors. So that was always a difficulty we had with that Building B and with some of our other market properties, even though most of our market properties are leased out. But we've never contracted with realtors on any of our market property in the past. But looking at how they estimated this, it does that 112,000, the $150,000 that they estimate we'd be able to get out of those two buildings, we are pulling in roughly 170,000 in revenues from those, as well as the parking spaces that are around.
What-
And then,
Where's the parking space rent listed? Maybe I,
so they did not estimate any parking space rent for our facilities.
okay.
What they simply did was looked at the assets that we had and determined it. Go ahead, Paul.
Were you asking, what are we renting, or where is it showing on that page, ma'am? Because I can tell you what we're renting. if that
You're
was the
renting,
question.
Building C.
So there's a couple of places where we're renting, there's a truck driving school that rents parking space from us, and then there are, 5 companies that operate, they rent space from us to park refrigerated trucks overnight. Yeah, so there's the combination of those two things.
Representative Dickey.
One thing the committee should look at is capital expenses for each of our markets. How much has been spent on capital expenses during the years or during some recent times. I think that's a big reflection on rents. Macon Market, in my opinion, I think it's the same building, same configuration it was when it was built, whatever number of years ago. It really hadn't been any capital improvements put into it. So naturally, rents are probably at rock bottom, or so I think I think we need to keep that in our head. If the more state rep money, bond money, or whatever you put in the facility, certainly you're gonna have more rents coming back, and that's just not the case down in Macon. I don't think, and probably some other of our markets as well.
Well, and I look at here when they're talking about, and I don't know how y'all feel about it, on Building C, the potential rent, $8.50 a square foot is a lot of money for one of those buildings, I would think. Yeah. Huh? It looks like a lot, with the condition and the location and the traffic, the traffic count you'd have coming by. I mean, to me, that looks like a lot of money for that. I mean, I don't think too, because
I mean, I think, in my opinion, and this is only my opinion, I think the department probably assessed through the years, it wouldn't get a good return on investment to put any money into this market, and so they haven't, and so it's just been by design neglect, so to speak, which I think is good business decision. It really wasn't any type activity there that was growing or was viable, so you just sort of let it go in the direction it's going, and that's kind of what I think you have at Macon, and just doing the best they can with getting some revenue out of the asset.
Representative Anderson.
Senator.
Senator Anderson. It'll always be Representative Anderson.
All right, thank you, Madam Chairman. How many acres is the whole tract?
I know I have it in
Remember right offhand. I don't remember the exact acreage of it. We can find it.
seminary.
Has there been any talk about the wooded area?
There has been.
The potential for it, development, if we could get someone that could utilize it, back to Representative Dickey's comment, that's exactly correct as far as what's been put into it. We make most of our money on our markets off of refrigerated cold storage space. And Macon, unfortunately, I guess you would say, is too close to Atlanta. So a large tenant that wants to come in and rent something like this building that GEMA has, they don't want to be in Macon, they want to be in Atlanta. And that refrigerated space, that large space, is nothing that we've been able to rent out. There's been talk of the wooded area, to your conversation, of what could be, but no true traction in anything there, no.
The appraisal that we did recommended best uses for some of those facilities, and their recommendation actually for that wooded area was residential, which, you know, we're not going to get involved in.
Thank you.
Representative Gilliard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur with you about the residential, because I heard you say that there was a lot of activity around there in the neighborhood.
Yep.
So if you added more housing, I agree. How, the businesses that you have, what are the type businesses? I saw a real good article here that looks like small businesses, they benefit, and then there's a reciprocation of more businesses coming in. So this business grows and they leave, and it looks like you have a waiting list for small businesses.
Well, I feel like across the state, there's demand for small business food processing facilities, in addition to some cooler spaces, but shared kitchen facilities, that sort of thing. So I know at least 3 of our tenants are using it as a commercial production space for their food business. And then I know there's 2 restaurants on the area as well. Back, if I could say, in Macon's heyday, when it was making a significant profit, a good part of that C building was used as a license and tag office for Bibb County. And when they consolidated those offices and moved them off of the market, which was a big loss to the market, not only the revenue, but also the steady traffic that brought. So, you know, we have some facilities that are not necessarily catered to that sort of food processing facilities there, but, you know, that could be something that could be looked at to invest in that building to create more of an incubator space for
Like a commercial
food-based
kitchen
businesses.
that you,
commercial
that
kitchens.
you could use and rent out to different potential businesses.
That's correct.
Doesn't the department have a place in Griffin for a commercial kitchen? Is that?
So if I'm understanding your question, UGA Food Pick
Yeah.
operates a testing
and-
laboratory facility.
Okay, it's UGA, not Department of Agriculture.
Great facility, though.
Representative Dickey, when we look at the farmer's market, I'm sort of glad to see that some of this cost is really not going for the farmer's market. It just sort of justifies a big loss. I think it just sheds a whole new light on it from the way I saw it than just losing money. But I was wondering down here when I read about the rent space, do they pay anything for electricity, or is electricity included in the rent?
So I'm not exactly sure. I do know that we've had difficulty sub-metering some of our facilities because that's an additional cost just to put in some of those sub-meters. My understanding is that we do charge utility costs on top of their lease rates. However, this gets us back in that sticky situation of we can charge them for utilities, but that money doesn't get spent on utilities. It goes back to the Treasury, and it doesn't cover the cost of those actual utilities.
So your expenses, you don't take your expenses out of the money you take in?
No. All of the revenues from the market, even the utility fees, go back to the general fund.
No wonder you can't make money.
That's right, yes.
I mean, there's no way you make money if you can't do. I mean, if you can't deduct your expenses. Mr. Baird, do you see a problem?
I see the problem and I'm happy to talk about it now.
Yeah, is it all right if we sort of get out of the agenda and go to Mr. Barry, and he has a memorandum on the farmer's market that he gave, and this sort of, I know we're sort of skipping around, but we don't have many people, and this is real informal. Is it all right with y'all if we skip down to Mr. Barry? Thank you, Mr. Barry.
Sure. So you can see in front of you, there's a memorandum that I've put there. And before I even start, I do just want to say I have no perfect solutions for you all. I don't want to overpromise anything. But Representative Houston had asked me to look into the problem that was brought up last week in a little bit more detail, and I have two potential, shall we say, creative solutions. So there's certainly no slam dunk, but we'll see. So the problem, just to reiterate sort of from last week, is that the code section does say that the commissioner has the authority to collect these fees to pay the necessary costs of operating and maintaining farmers markets. However, that is superseded by the constitutional language that you can see on the next page, which is that this is Article 7 of the Constitution. Except as otherwise provided in this Constitution, all revenue collected from taxes, fees, and assessments for state purposes, as authorized by revenue measures enacted by the General Assembly, shall be paid into the general fund of the state treasury. So that's just our basic premise here. The first sort of solution that could be a possibility for doing what the Department of Agriculture is proposing and keeping these fees comes from the Attorney General actually wrote an opinion in 1977 that sort of interpreted this constitutional language, and they identified 5 different scenarios in which an agency would not be required to revert funds back to the general fund. The first 4 we can just ignore, they're just really not applicable here, but the 5th one interprets this language revenue measures and sort of interprets it in a way to say that if the General Assembly has not directed the agency to collect the funds in the first place by some very specific statutory authority, then there is no need to revert the funds back to the general fund. So that the language there is on page 2. This is coming from the Attorney General's opinion. Therefore, if the collection of funds does not depend upon a statutory premise, a statutory command, or authorization to collect the funds, then the funds may be retained by the agency concerned. So the opinion that this was based on, or the opinion that was being expressed at the time, they did not have this statutory premise, and so the Attorney General was saying that they didn't have to collect the funds. However, as we sort of all know, on page 1, there is a very specific direction to collect the farmers market fees. So the creative solution that I think at least holds potential water is that we could amend the statute to, ironically, eliminate the fee collecting authority and then have the Department of Agriculture use some more general authority that they may or may not already have. I think they would know that better than me, to collect fees from the farmers markets, thus not being required to revert those funds. It sounds sort of backwards and ironic, but that is a potential solution that a bill could basically strike that language from the farmers market section of the code. A potentially better solution is the second part, and going back to that constitutional language, which is, again, the sort of problem in the first place. There is, in Section B of that same exact section of the Constitution, an exception to the initial language. So Section B is stated at the bottom of the second page of the memorandum, and it says, as authorized by law, providing for the promotion of any one or more types of agricultural products, fees, assessments, or other charges collected on the sale or processing of agricultural products need not be paid into the general fund of the state treasury. Now, my understanding of that language, which is by no means authoritative, would be that this goes towards commodities taxes. You know, when on the sale of Georgia peanuts, a few cents is collected so that collectively marketing efforts can be made to promote Georgia peanuts, for instance. However, I think a argument could certainly be made that a farmer's market is there for the promotion of one or more types of agricultural products, and that these fees or assessments are being collected on the sale or processing of those agricultural products. Whether the Department of Revenue or the Attorney General or a court would agree with that argument, I really cannot say. I think that would be totally out of my hands, but it is a potential solution that would, as far as I see it, require no legislation from the committee or the General Assembly. It's something that the Department of Agriculture would either get an attorney, you all would get an Attorney General's opinion on it, or they simply do it and see how it lands in court. But short of those two solutions, which are the only ones that I have been able to find, in order for them to retain those fees, they would need a constitutional amendment to that language identified at the top of page 2. So I'm sorry that I don't have any more concrete solutions, but that's my understanding.
Can I hear from the committee about what y'all want to do about this?
It's real intriguing to me. I mean, it's, at the top of that page, it says revenue collected for fees for state purposes. And in my opinion, I'm not an attorney, but the Department of Revenue does do a lot of regulating of gasoline pumps, inspecting meat and other things, and that is for state purposes. But it doesn't look like to me that what goes on in our farmers markets is for state purposes. It's for marketing. It's for, and it's kind of like that bottom paragraph. It's for promotion and working business. So I'd certainly like to see us move forward to do something that just this business model that we're using, all these fees going back, it's not working right.
It is not working.
And so I guess my other question, Madam Chairman, would be how much revenue are we receiving? I mean, I can't believe the governor's office would care too bad if the amount of revenue we're getting from the farmers markets is fairly equal to what we're spending at the farmers markets. It would be just sort of a wash. I mean, not a perfect wash, but not a big mover of any kind of budget or loss, or it'd be so I think it would really benefit our farmers markets if we could go ahead and test the waters and move forward and do something.
I agree. Do you, Senator Anderson?
Has there been any research on how other states handle this situation?
Yes. The other states that operate state farmers markets are Florida, South Carolina, and North Carolina. They, through different structures, do retain all of their market revenues. Whether it's simply a fund that's created in state statute for them to retain those revenues in, or whether it's a full authority that they've created, but it's some level of that.
I mean, possibly we need to look at more of them, how they, because we're gonna be kind of going in a area that we hadn't been in before. Maybe we need to study them a little closer, the other states.
And there was a link in last 2 weeks ago, I guess, meetings packet that went to North Carolina, Florida, and South Carolina, and how they were handling those fees in last time's information.
Okay.
Charlie?
Yes.
I do have a question. If, there's a couple different advantages here. One, to retaining the revenue helps us manage the markets easier throughout the year. Do you think this option also would allow us to retain the revenue past a fiscal year? Because being able to save money from the operations of the markets becomes beneficial as well, right? So if
Well, and you need a little cushion, and I know at the end of the year, you're supposed to return everything to revenue. Now, I guess that's the difference in doing an authority with an authority, you would be able to retain the money,
Right. I mean,
correct?
I mean, that, if that's the one end of the spectrum, some of those other state markets are, through their statutes, create special funds that exist that can hold the money and carry it over. I don't know whether we have that in our state, even the ability to do those funds.
Uh, Representative Watson. Oh, I'm sorry.
Legislative Council.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm in someone's chair. Madam Chair, I think I can answer that, which is, if you were keeping the funds under some presumed constitutional authority, I don't think that those funds would be required to go revert at the end of the fiscal year for any particular reason. However, getting at sort of the way that some of the other states do it, my understanding of the way that Georgia operates is that there is a certain specific percentage of the state budget that is allowed to be kept in these sort of separate pots, and that number is something like 1%. It's very, very small, and is almost always basically immediately filled up. That's my understanding, and in order to change that, I think that would be a very large constitutional change.
Senator Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the way the markets are operating now, where all the revenue goes into the general fund, you have to come back to the legislature, ask for your appropriation for your operating expenses, then any capital outlay you want for capital projects, maintenance, et cetera. I mean, that's not unique in state government. That is all the way across all kind of entities. I mean, Department of Natural Resources, Parks and Recreation, operate state parks. They have lodging that they rent or camping spaces they rent, and they return all the revenue to the state treasury. They don't take out for expenses. They return it 100%, and then we appropriate for their operating expenses. The gate card was being operated like that. We were able to get part of that into that dedicated fee pot of money, that 1% that the attorney was just speaking of. So it's not, I think the Technical College System of Georgia, they charge tuition. That goes into the general fund. We then appropriate. I mean, that's just common, the way state government works. Everybody likes to talk about, well, government needs to operate like a business. Well, it's not like a business. It doesn't operate like a business. That's not to say that we can't change it or try to address it, but I don't know that this idea necessarily would hold up. I'd be happy to try to test it if the committee so wanted to. But on the attorney, on the bottom part of page 2, where you are kind of comparing this to the commodity commissions and the checkoff dollars for marketing, would rent, you think, fall into this definition, or would we have to start charging a percentage of sales to make it fit into that fee type, marketing fee category?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think it certainly makes it a weaker argument. Rent does. Like I said, I definitely can't go one way or the other definitively. I don't even know if the idea is valid on its face, much less with the consideration of rent. But I do think, to your point, that having rent be a significant part of the fees as opposed to the specific sale of goods makes it a weaker argument.
What I think too, if this holds up, we're talking about agricultural products. When you're talking about the parks, that's not really an agricultural product, and this little exception was just for agriculture. Don't you think that'd make a difference?
Yes, if we're going to make the comparison that this is like a commodity checkoff for marketing. And to make that argument, I almost think you would have to charge your tenants a percentage of their sales of ag products instead of charging them, or maybe in addition or in lieu of charging them rent. And I don't know that y'all are capable of managing that with the current structure.
Does anybody think it's worthwhile for us to get an opinion from the Attorney General and see?
I think so. I'm not trying to argue against it. I'm just,
What's the will of the committee? Do y'all let's try to get an opinion from the Attorney General?
Get a ruling.
Senator Anderson has suggested that we get a ruling. All in favor of it? Anyone opposed? Okay, I don't know how you go about getting a ruling for the Attorney General, but I guess y'all do.
I'm fine with trying it and asking for
You would
forgiveness
ask
later.
forgiveness later. I don't know if the commissioner would be, Paul, would you want to try it and ask for forgiveness? But I'd rather, I don't know, I sort of think, I'm afraid of the IRS too. What about us getting, do you know how to go about it?
I don't know how to get an opinion, but we can find out.
Mayor, I didn't mean to call you by your first name. I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. Madam Chair, I actually have, I haven't done it here. In Virginia, any state delegate or agency could get an opinion from the Attorney General, and I'm sorry that I'm not familiar with the process in
Okay.
Georgia.
Well, we'll get David and Morgan to work on that.
Yeah.
Give us an opinion. Is that okay? That's, okay? All right, we'll move on. And I don't think till we can get an opinion about this, we can go any further about it. And y'all have worked hard, and I realize that. And I'm just glad to know that some of this, all these expenses, that some of them are for, this, study group, or study, what do you call it, center, study center, training center.
Yeah.
And we will see about addressing that when we address the budget.
Great.
Okay? All right, the next thing on the agenda, if I can find it in all these papers y'all have given us, the next thing on the agenda, Paul was going to review the Atlanta Farmers Market. Paul, Mr. Thompson, I'm calling you by your first name. You can call me by my first name, too.
You good? Yeah, I can go ahead. So I know last time, at the last meeting, there was a lot of discussion about master planning or looking into the farmers markets, about what's the best use for these markets. And we had done a study back in 2013, 2012 with Jacobs Engineering, and it's a large study. Paul's got the full printed version. I've got thumb drives with the actual study. What I've done here is I've printed out highlighted pages of some of the summaries of the information for you to review, but the full study itself is on the thumb drives. I can send you a link so you can download it if you're interested. I can walk through real quickly the full study, just going to each page and stopping for some of those highlights. But again, it's a long, extensive study that was done a little less than 10 years ago. The first page, and the first one that I have printed out here, is an important one. It talks about the scope of what their project is, but it also mentions one of the big issues with the markets, and that's the competing goals of the market. We touched on that briefly last time, but if you think about all of our markets and what they're supposed to be doing, they're kind of in competition with each other, the goals are. One, we want the markets to make revenue. Two, we also want the markets to benefit Georgia farmers, but we also want the markets to create economic development and jobs and benefit businesses. And we also want the markets to be aesthetically pleasing, give people a way to go and buy produce directly from a farmer. And a lot of times, especially in one facility, those are difficult to all happen at the same time. And we run into that, and we got to think about that when we're planning a facility, because as Chair Lady mentioned, it's tough to have traffic plans when you've got wholesale buyers, retail buyers, and then individuals all going through the same facility. And this master plan takes that into consideration. And I'm just going to flip through some of these pages on the screen, just to kind of give you an overview of what they talked about. They looked at the background and history of the markets. They looked at the location of the market and how it's in surrounding areas. And if you want, should I just flip to the next page that we're on here, Paul? Okay, well, I'm just going to go, again, I can show some highlights in the full document, but in the next page here is some of their key findings that they found. Their two major goals here one was a conditioning of the market to look at the current facilities and some of the issues that were there as far as the building structures, which buildings needed to be replaced, which ones could continue, and then how do you plan for the next 20 years of the market. So if you look at some of the key findings, which is the third column on that second page, you go through where they kind of give you an overview of the market, but they do highlight that the current facility, I think this is the third bullet point down, current facility condition deficiency of 36.4 million. They highlight some of these deficiencies and how they're going to continue to be deficient going forward, and they gave us a roadmap to how do we resolve some of those. And again, this happened 10 years ago, so we've been able to resolve some of those deficiencies as we've gone forward through capital spending, through things like roof repairs, the water plan that we're currently trying to do, and some of building envelope improvements as well. The next page is where you can kind of see some of those improvements that we were able to make. So I'll bring your attention to the buildings that are highlighted in red. Those are the buildings that they said are not worth fixing, that they're better to be demolished and to put in new uses. The buildings in yellow are kind of on the bridge there, whether they can be fixed or replaced. And the green buildings are ones that have a good use still in them. They can be repaired and continue to provide us services at the market. What you'll notice, especially those red top three buildings at the top, buildings 16 through 11, those were the buildings that were demolished to make way for the new Collins Produce Building T.
Building T, that's correct.
Building T facility that we've done. We've made budget requests, and we're in the process of making budget requests for the demolition of those other buildings, either south of that or Building 30, in order to expand on Building T and add more cooler warehouse facility to the market. Anything I need to add?
If you look at a little bit of a timeline since we did this study, basically, if you're looking at these deficiencies, you're seeing roofing is the first one. You were gracious enough to us. We did a $5 million bond package to where we did 3 phases of roof replacements. So the first phase had 3 buildings, second phase had 3 buildings, the third phase had, I want to tell you, that's 5 buildings. So we got those roofs reworked. That's a 20-year warranty on the roofs, and that was the first phase from this, was taking this and getting those roofs sound. The next thing we did was we came and we asked for that building. So we're going to get into this a little bit more later, but knowing that we probably weren't going to take down the entire side of the market at one time, and it really doesn't fit our tenants' business model. But what does make sense? And as Matt pointed out, buildings 11 through 16, which were highlighted as being poor to replacement condition, they needed to go. That was the very first thing that went, and that is where Building T came from. Water is also mentioned. Water study, we did a water study. We were given $500,000 for a water study. We have not used $500,000 to do a study. We do indeed have a plan. That plan is in place, and that plan is estimated to be about a $1.2 million investment into replacing that water system. So that's just a little bit of a walkthrough of some things that we've done since we've received this study.
In the full study, they do talk on the circulation analysis, and I've got that up on the screens too, just to mention that to you, Chair Lady, since you mentioned it. They did look at some circulation and signage improvements that needed to be made at the market. And that's something that we can look at as we continue to do these improvements at the market. But it is a need that we have identified for the market. A couple of the other things they did identify and gave suggestions on were the security of the market, as well as food safety and sanitation. I know that's something that you mentioned in the previous meeting. The next page well, and I do want to show here, as they went on recommendations for how to improve the markets, they looked at other facilities around the country that are kind of best use and best in practices, and that's what's on the screen now. And this was that Philadelphia terminal market, which had just been completed construction when they started the study, and is kind of seen as a best model for a produce distribution facility in the country. But they also looked at everything from the New York markets, Chicago, and even retail markets, including the Atlanta municipal market downtown. So they looked at both wholesale as well as retail markets in their evaluations. On the next page in your packet, is those food safety and sanitary design guides that I had just shown you, that there are some improvements that need to be made specifically to food safety, since that is something that you mentioned. On the next page is when they look at the program goals for how do we improve this facility going forward. And we're looking at how do we improve everything from the traffic plan, truck circulation, access to the buildings, how do we move food in and out of there, as well as the future needs as we go forward. You know, a market that serves as a tool for retaining and attracting business, facilities designed to provide maximum flexibility to support tenant changes, modern infrastructure, food safety standards. They took all of these things into effect and when giving us the final recommendations. On the next page, there's a discussion of the guiding principles that they use to do that. Again, mentioning things like visitor experience, safety, security, wayfinding, accessibility in their overall master planning. And the next page talks about, they looked at alternatives. So the question was whether or not the market should stay in its current location. Option 2, and simply be redeveloped. Option 2 was, does the market wholesale facilities stay in its location and a retail component be relocated somewhere else in the metropolitan Atlanta area? And the third option was, let's simply relocate the whole market. And they laid out the pros and cons to all of those. And they recommended, along with our agreement, that scenario 1, keeping the current market and simply redeveloping at its location would be the best course of action. You probably can't get a better footprint in the metropolitan Atlanta area for this farmers market than the one that it's on now, with access not only to rail, but 75 and 285 and the airport nearby. The next page is where you start to see some of their recommendations. Again, they looked at the idea of simply using that Philadelphia terminal market, which was the best practice market that currently existed at that point, replacing the sheds and building that full market there, along with a retail component that's relocated on the west side of the market. We did not have the financing available to do something that large in one big gulp. So instead, we're looking at it from a different way of doing it, kind of piecemeal, removing those sheds and replacing it with the larger markets. Another thing that kind of delayed some of the improvements that we did there is on the west side of the market, DOT has done a new interchange with Forest Parkway and 75, which has made some of those improvements on the side, you know, has changed it and kind of delayed any need or ability to make those improvements at that place. That makes sense. And then on this last page is just kind of their breakdown of what these sort of improvements would cost in total. The actual study itself has pages and pages of conditioning and assessments and price breakdowns and that sort of thing. Again, this is simply the study, the summary page. But they looked at both the first term costs, and you can see first term 1, just some of that conditioning improvements at $33 million, and then that to do those improvements that I just showed on the previous screen would have been $285 million. But you can see that huge number down at the bottom to do a full replacement of the entire market, which is taking that first building, replicating it 3 times so that you have 3 major buildings of close to $1 billion. So, but that is kind of what we asked them for, kind of how do we get from the very bottom to, dream development on that property? And that's kind of where they came up with that final notice. Again, this presentation in this document, you could probably go through for weeks, but unfortunately, I was just able to give you kind of a surface view of it.
Questions?
Yep.
Representative Dickey.
Thank you, Chairman. I hate to keep asking questions, but
No, please do.
the wholesale produce dealers up on the hill, those buildings are older, aging. What is the economic demand now from them for more newer buildings or efficient building? I mean, is there, we put a new building down on the bottom, and who's in that building?
That's Phoenix.
Phoenix, okay. Where did they come from up on the hill? Freed up some space up there, I guess, that we have released or not, or?
So all of the Atlanta market space stays full. So Phoenix is a sister company of Collins Wholesale.
Okay.
When Phoenix Retail moved out to Building T, Collins Wholesale, the parent company, just takes over the entire building. So they still have that lease.
Okay. So I get what I'm getting at. A logical progression would be to put another building or two down on the lower side and start converting the tenants from their older buildings up on the hill down to new facilities.
So I would agree with that 100%. So on page 3, when you start looking at the color codes of good conditions, average to below or poor to replacement, we're looking at those sheds as being average or below or poor to replacement.
Yeah.
Now, they've got colored green most of your hillside buildings, so they're structurally sound. That tenant would argue you that they would like to have higher space.
Right.
They would like to have a building that's not chopped up, and most certainly they would like to have a building that's got 5 chambers, much as Building T does, with delivery on one side, with access on another side, so it just flows through, which is certainly not what these buildings
Correct.
were built for in
They're
the
obsolete,
50s.
really. I mean-
Sure, absolutely, yes, sir.
How do you, good question.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
All your spaces rented out, everything.
Yes,
How do you decide if somebody wanted to come and get some space, a Georgia farmer wanted to come up and rent space, what would he do?
So there's always space for a Georgia farmer under the sheds, so we
The
don't have.
sheds, you're talking about down here in these other buildings.
talking about
a
open
nice
space.
place for, this is Georgia Farmers Market. I want a nice place for our Georgia farmers.
Absolutely, yep. So there's a waiting list for folks that are looking for space on the market. We would absolutely take that information, and if that was a Georgia farmer that was looking to put in a business, and we would try to figure out where we could.
Will y'all have people using some of these buildings for storage?
They're all being, for storage.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
yes, ma'am.
So some of them are storage, couldn't you store the stuff somewhere else? You don't have any
It's
storage?
storage of their business supplies, so,
Okay, not just storage for stuff they're not using all the time, just storage.
well, an example, if I might. So when we talked about the exhibit hall last week, that was part of the audit that we had discussed earlier. So that exhibit hall space, once Atlanta Produce Dealers stopped using it, we took it back, and then it was actually leased to the Market Grocery Company. So the Market Grocery Company does nothing other than store their dry goods in it. It's not
Okay.
refrigerated,
Okay.
but they do absolutely nothing in that building but
Except
store stuff.
Okay,
That's absolutely
that's
right.
not what I'm talking about. I
Okay.
just didn't know if they put things they aren't using right there in storage to use later on. Maybe that was from the Atlanta folks that were doing that. They had exhibit hall?
That's right.
Okay. Representative Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on the page with all the, what page it is, the last page, so there's over $50 million in relocating tenants as required. Just, I guess, why are we required to relocate them? They're paying rent. Is that what requires us to relocate them and pay for that? Shouldn't it be, hey, we're gonna build you a new building?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know how we could do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's fair.
and it's like, you go to the bottom of the hill and you just bulldoze the whole thing, and, you start building buildings down there one at a time like you did with the Collins, and, I mean, I would think you could have a pretty big savings there, but, and the relocation would, I mean, that's kind of up to them. They would have to go get somewhere else to live and operate until the new building was ready. So is there anybody other than Collins down on the bottom side that's in wholesale, or is it just they're the only ones? And they 30 through 37 or 17 to P back to 10.
Let me pull that map so that I'm looking at it, and I'll try to walk through it. So yeah, so building P would be all seasons produce, that is wholesale. Building 51 is, there's two tenants, Representative Watson, and I'm trying to remember which two they are, but they're operating wholesale in 51, and A. Garcia is operating in building N. You have Southeast Processing in building 50. In building 29, you have Olympica Produce and Pos Produce.
But what about like 10, all the reds right there and orange? You got 10 through 3, so you got pretty big spot there, and then you got 26 through 17. You got another big. Is anybody in those? Any active businesses?
It's folks renting space. I mean, all of it's full, yes, but it's not enclosed wholesale space that we're using, no. But there's nothing open as far as not being used. But I mean, if as you were pointing out, this relocating. I mean, if that's where we decide we're going to put a building, then there's a hard decision that's made, and it's going away.
Yeah. Okay.
Representative Anderson. Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You're all right, Bill. Thank you. I go back to who decides the going rate on the rent?
So we haven't increased rents, I know, in 10 years. So the assessments that we just had done do show some rental rates and what some of the commercial property in the area is. But I guess that is a call for the commissioner. He's the one that sets the going rates, as I understand our laws. Is that, yeah.
Well, and then again, do we just rent it by year?
So there's two things happening here. There's leases that are leased by the year, and then they have renewal clauses in those leases. And then most of the folks on the bottom side where we were looking at earlier from 10 through 3, they're monthly rental tenants. So they don't have a lease, they have a rental agreement, and they rent from us by the month. Now, that being said, they don't go anywhere. It's not new folks this month, new folks next month. It's the same people there, but it's under a rental agreement.
And in that rental agreement, they do not pay no water bill or no power bill.
They do pay power bill.
They do pay power bill.
Yes, sir.
They don't pay water.
Some of those don't have water. Those that do have water are charged a water fee. It's a small fee,
Okay,
but there is not an individual water meter under those sheds. When you get to the garden center, there is. But if you look on the east end of all of the sets of sheds that we're talking about on the bottom side, you'll see a complete bank of electrical service, and each one of those tenants has their own electricity. Now, we're paying for the lights, we're paying for that under there, but they have their own electricity.
Okay.
It's broken up.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Gillian.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I think that's something that we need to look at. So you're saying that a lot of these vendors are kind of grandfathered in reference to their rates of the cost of what they're paying, or tenants, I'm sorry.
So grandfathered in, we haven't gone up on those rates.
That's what I'm
leases.
saying.
Yeah.
In the audit report, didn't they indicate that y'all need to go up on the rates because of, it would be, I can't think of the word, what's? Gratuity. Did you read that in the audit report?
I believe the gratuity section had to do with the.
APDA, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
the agreement with
I
APDA.
thought the gratuities was for the Atlanta Produce Dealers Association.
Okay,
Yes.
but I didn't, I just saw something about the, I was looking for it in the thing.
Yeah.
But I can't see why you haven't gone up on the rent in 10 years when everything else has gone up.
And Madam Chair, I wanted to, can I continue?
Yes, sir.
The reason why I said it, because here again, going back to Savannah as a market, we had tenants in there that have been in there for years, and we don't know what they're paying. And so when you talk about the loss in the markets, it's like Madam Chair was talking about, we need to consider we're going to improve to go up on those rates. Because in Savannah, we got one tenant that has one part of the market some days and 3/4 all the rest of the week. And so the question is it the farmer's market or his market? So, just a little bit concerned about that.
Okay, I think since you're on the budget oversight, the audit oversight committee, that's something you can look into. You're on that committee. Okay? Representative Watson.
Madam Chair, if it's benefiting Georgia farmers, which I don't know that we've gotten full clarification on that, and that's what I said in our last meeting. I don't want to spend a bunch of taxpayer money if we're not helping the taxpayers. But, if it's benefiting Georgia farmers, then I don't have a problem with a lower than average rent price, but I don't know that it is at the end of the day. So that would greatly help us if we had some kind of, info that supported that it is helping our Georgia farmers, not foreign farmers.
Representative Watson, did you receive that gate data that we sent?
Mm.
No. That was sent?
Yep.
Yep.
I think Morgan has it, and I think there could be copies on the thumb drives we had today as well.
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we'll look for it.
Yeah, no, I know I sent it to Bo, I guess Friday will be 2 weeks ago, so I'm not saying that you have it, but I need to follow up and see where it went.
We need to follow
Yes,
up on
ma'am.
that.
Sure.
Go
Well,
ahead.
and just to follow up, I think that, then I want to say, well, okay, even if it's not, or even if it is, if you're paying the going rate of Forest Park, can it sustain a $900 million, can it pay its own way if you're charging what you're supposed to be charging and have a state-of-the-art facility,
Well, unfortunately, a lot of this goes back to that same issue we've been dealing with of the market's not retaining its revenues.
Well, the market doesn't retain the revenue, but the state gives y'all's money all back
That's
to
right.
it every time.
That's right.
So I think it's best, I don't know, have other farmers markets not gone up in 10 years? Other produce terminals?
In Georgia
You
or
talked
surrounding
about
areas.
the Philadelphia market. Have they not gone up in 10 years?
I don't know.
I
Yeah,
think it would
don't
be
know.
interesting to see.
Yeah.
Since we were, had them in the study. I know the rental and other properties have gone up in 10 years, I would think. I know my farmer's paying more rent that rents my land than he did 10 years ago. Any other questions? Do y'all, anything else y'all want to add? I think we've got enough to go on and enough to do, and if we get busy on these committees. About the transportation, Senator Say's not here and Representative Carter. Have y'all worked with DOT? Can they have somebody to come in and study it, or?
We haven't
We
talked
have-
with them, but
we
we
have
will.
not, but I would be happy to do so.
Since we have DOT, I think it might be good that we could get DOT to come in but that's something for them. I'll talk with Senator Say and Representative Carter about it.
Great.
Okay? Anybody want, and I appreciate y'all are working hard to try to save these things, and they pointed out some good things that we can work on. Anybody else, you have anything else you wanted to work on? You've got your work cut out for you. Senator Anderson.
We'll take this home and study it.
Okay, all right. And don't forget your blue folder.
You want it back?
No, that's you. I guess we can take them back and put more stuff in them, but just keep, okay. Anything else? Thank you, and thank y'all so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.